The United Nations says police forces around the world should stop using facial recognition technology on people attending peaceful protests. Technology like the system that you can see here scans faces in a crowd and matches them with identities stored on a database. Well, police forces say it helps them spot wanted criminals, but the UN has other concerns.
Facial recognition, though, constitutes a paradigm shift. It dramatically increases the capacity to identify and track all or many participants in an assembly in an automated fashion and sometimes in real time. At the same time, facial recognition today remains prone to errors. That means in this context that misidentification could lead to wrongful arrests, for example, or prosecutions.
The United Nations says the technology could violate demonstrators' rights to peaceful assembly and deter people from exercising their democratic right to protest. The technology is already being used. This is Cardiff, here in the UK. Welsh police have deployed these vans at international rugby games and pop concerts, but also at demonstrations. On a much bigger scale, in Hong Kong last year, protesters from the democracy movement went to huge lengths to avoid being identified, shining lasers onto police lines, as you can see, in an effort to confuse any scanners that might be there. Well, this group went a step further, chopping down a camera mast. Then they stamped on it and used some sort of liquid to disable it. The authorities say these are traffic cameras, but protesters believe they're for surveillance. Well, most recently, the issue came up in the US too, in huge wave of protests following the death of George Floyd. Several tech companies, including Microsoft and IBM, said they would stop selling facial recognition systems to police forces as intense scrutiny fell on policing methods across the board. Imogen Fuchs in Geneva has got more on the UN's recommendation.
So this report from the UN Human Rights Office, it comes at a really interesting time because obviously we've seen over the past few weeks Black Lives Matter demonstrations right around the world and allegations of excessive police intervention, excessive use of force. Now, what the UN was looking particularly at here is the kinds of things that law enforcement agencies use around demonstrations. Facial recognition is one of them. In a quite surprising move, the UN has said, don't just control it. It wants a moratorium on the use of facial recognition at peaceful protests. It says governments really need to, first of all, guarantee how and why that data is being used, and that people's civic rights and human rights are protected when it's used. Also says demonstrations, peaceful demonstrations, should not be recorded anyway, that there isn't a need for law enforcement officers to do that.